In this video, I'm gonna design a modern techno poster.
Dreadlabs.
What's going on, everyone? My name is Tom from Dreadlabs and I'm a visual artist and graphic designer. And in today's video, I want to show you my process when it comes to improvising and designing a flyer with the modern techno aesthetics, inspired by flyers that I've been seeing around that are kind of like trendy, I guess. And yeah, I'm just gonna design this poster from scratch and show you my full-on process from start to finish. So without any further ado, let's dive straight into the video. Two versions of the poster, one clean, one a lot more grungy. Let me know in the comments which one you like the most. We're gonna be working in Adobe Illustrator for the composition and in Adobe Photoshop for the finishing touches, the coloring and the texturing. And if you want to download the work files for yourself and you want to use them in your own projects, whether it's for personal purposes or commercial purposes, you can download them in the link in the description down below. So let's go to New Document, to Print, and to A3. And we'll create a new Illustrator file here. And something that I like to do right off the bat when creating a document is make sure that there's also the margins included for when you would send it to the printer. This is completely optional, but what I tend to do is just make a rectangle from endpoint to endpoint. Then I'm going to grab the artboard tool over here, and with the anchor point here in the middle, what I'm going to do is just add 6 millimeters in the width, so plus 6 and plus 6. And as you can see, there's now a 3 millimeter expansion around this rectangle. And now what I want to do is just make the rectangle like a bright pink or something and just put it in a new layer, and then we can lock that layer. And now we just know that like everything outside of this pink rectangle will probably be cut off when you print a lot of these posters in one go at the printer's office. So yeah, that's just something that I try to keep in mind when designing a printable poster. Whatever you want to put in your posters, of course, completely up to you. But what I want to be working with is some of the electronic artists that I've been into like lately. And I think I'm just gonna make up a fictional club where these people would play in one night. So the first thing that I tend to do is just get all of the important info in there as quickly as possible without like any like font picking or anything like that. So we'll just do like January, and that's just because January 6th, 2026, I turn 30 years old. All right, so now that I have all the info that I want to hear in here, I'm gonna play around a little bit with the composition. I already did it a little bit, as you can see. Mostly, I think I will be playing around with the position of all of the artists and if I want to have like a main art in there or not. I kind of have a vague idea of what I want to do, but in this case, it's just a matter of like moving stuff around. What I am gonna do is select all of these and put them to all caps, and then I think let's pick out a font first and then we can play around with the size and the position. So what I'm looking for in this font is essentially just a clean, nice, legible font. And I want to have one more compressed variation for the info at the top and bottom so it doesn't take up as much space in the width. And I already found a font that I like for the artists. Maybe I'm going to play around a little bit with the different types of widths and weights of the font, but let's see in a minute. All right, I think what I have right now is I like it. Maybe let's go with a medium so it's a little bit thicker, and we can transform this bottom font to this one as well. Let's make sure the outline is correct. I think I have a general idea of what my composition should be, and that's I want to have the information in the corners. For me, like I think more important information is where the party should be, what time it should be, and where it is, of course. The ticket price is something that you don't really want as the first thing to pop up, because then someone would be like, okay, this is too expensive, I'm not even going to check out what the lineup is or whatever. And in this case, I think, to me at least, these artists would be something that I would check out regardless of the price. So I want to have these to be the utmost prominent place, I guess. But I also want to make this poster visually like appealing, sorry. So I think what I'm going to do is like leave a little bit of a base here and then have to use this bottom part here as kind of like the fill-in for the artists. So we have like a nice room for some art and also like the most visually prominent thing would be the artists. So yeah, let's work that out in a composition. And now that I think about it, maybe something that would be interesting is if they have like a very specific glyph that we can maybe use as a divider between the artists. So let's check out the glyph panel here. If you cannot find this for yourself, it's under window and then type, I think. Yeah, and then glyphs. I actually don't know what this symbol means, but I think what we can do is just make it like lighter, so it's like less heavy in terms of weight, so it doesn't really look as important as the actual names of the lineup. So now I'm just gonna make a quick rectangle in between these two names, and I'm just gonna make sure that we can align that to the rectangle, so it's exactly in the middle. So we're gonna do the same thing here, make sure that the rectangle is the same width as over here. Then we'll just duplicate this little symbol. And now we need to make sure that this is on the same baseline, of course. So I think we are there now. And then we can select the rectangle, click on it once more to make that a key object. And then we can align it to the middle of the key object, like so. Let's do it one more time. There we go. And I think, and we can just group this now and then just align it to the middle of the poster. So we have some nice breathing room around this as well. And I think we can just use the same font weight for this bottom text and then just make it all caps again and make sure that it's also aligned towards here. And I think what we need to do now is just group all of these together per row. So we have 4 rows. All right, so now we have this line out, and I think we can just move it over here somewhere. And let's align these two texts as well on the left and these ones on the right. There we go. Let's move this up a bit, and let's move this up a bit as well. So what I want to do now is see if there's any like vertical distribution that we need to take into account. So what I'm going to do is grid the rectangular grid tool, and I'm going to just make a rectangular grid. And before I let go of my mouse, I'm just going to make sure that we add enough divisions, and we can do that by pressing the up and down arrow on our keyboard. So now we have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And I think with 9, we can actually basically like determine the division a bit more. So what we're going to do is bring that like grid into the layer that we used in the very beginning to make the margins. And we'll just make sure that it's the same color as well and lock that again. And I hope that this will help us, you know, figure out like how big everything should be in the poster in terms of contrast and stuff like that. So what I think would be a little bit important is to highlight this as much as possible. So what I want to do is make a rectangle, send it all the way to the back, and then all of the contents of the rectangle will be white essentially. Because now, as you can see, because of the contrast, this just pops a lot more. I want to align this to the middle of the top here. And actually, just want to make sure that this is all aligned properly. And the reason why I'm duplicating this layer is just because I want to put it on the same baseline height as at the top. So basically, this is like at half or the bottom half of that square, if that makes sense. So this is what we have now. And I think like this text can just be a lot smaller in general to begin with. So let's put that back to like, I don't know, 24 points, and we'll just bring that text a bit closer together. So yeah, basically what I would think now, because I'm just improvising all of this, but is we have these two parts, and I think they can be like one big art piece basically, where this lineup will just wrap around that, if that makes sense. So yeah, without any further ado, I'm just gonna like hide the layers here and save this as a file. We'll call this layout, and we can just save that as an Illustrator file. And now let's take this to Photoshop. So in Photoshop, I've already made a file. I'm just gonna make that again so you can follow along because of the cutting margins. So let's make a new A3 file. And now we wanna go to View, Guides, New Guide Layout. And we just want to have the margin guides with 0 pixels on each side, so it's all around the edges. And then we can go to Image, Canvas Size, and change the pixels to millimeters. And basically you want to round these off again, so they're like these numbers. And then we can just do +6 and +6, so that's 3 millimeters around each side. And there we go. Next, what we're going to do is click on File, Place Length, and we can bring in our layout. And what I also do in the options is click on Crop to Media Box, and then everything will be placed where it was in Illustrator. And another cool thing is if we would change like any text like in Illustrator and we save it, if we go to Photoshop, it will be almost immediately changed. So if we need to make any lineup changes, this is a fairly easy way to do that. All right, the next part that I want to actually explore is, of course, the main art. And I think what will help me with that is one of my asset packs. And feel free to, of course, do this in any way, shape, or form that you like. But for me, I haven't really done much in my videos with the Dread Renders Volume 5, which are a bunch of 3D renders. And I'm just going to showcase those real quick. So these are all like kind of like these very abstract metallic 3D renders, and I think this infection one is actually really cool. Let's drop that in. And what I think would be cool is if we select pieces of the art and have that go over the text, and some like we can just leave behind it, if that makes sense. So how I'm going to do that is by adding a mask to the infection 3D render, and go to the layout and then hold Control or Command on my keyboard and click on the thumbnail. And as you can see, that selects that. I'm going to click back on the mask of the infection layer, and with a black brush, I'm going to start painting. This might need a bit of tweaking. So what we want to do is deselect everything, click on this link button in between the mask and the 3D layer, and I'm just going to move this thing around a little bit. And I think like this works. The only thing I want to do is like rotate it so it's not completely over the letter I on Sumata. Something like this works. I think every name is still legible. So now let's go back in, hold Control Alt or Option, and we'll hold Control and click on the thumbnail, and then just start painting with the black marker again. All right. So one more thing that I'm going to do is remove the background here, and we'll make a dark gradient. So let's go to, let's see, we'll just do like a dark gradient like this, and then just move that to the background. We'll make it reflective, reverse that. All right, so now we have a little bit of color in the background, or at least a little bit of color depth in the background. So I think I want to make like two versions at this point, one cleaner, one with like 3D aesthetics, and then one that's going to be like really raw and like human made. And that's what my personal preference goes to. So in terms of like the gradient here, actually, I'm going to make another gradient. I'm going to just reset all of this, and let's make a gradient based on the colors of our 3D render. So we'll just pick some colors from the color picker window here, like that. And let's space these out a bit more evenly like this. We'll scale it up. Now let's play around with some blend modes. I think if we put it to overlay, it's getting a little bit lighter. And does this even do anything? Yeah, okay, it does. So let's make another gradient, and then I'm gonna make this one just black and a bit of a darker gray, and we'll lower the opacity of this gradient at the end by 50%. And we'll just make a linear one, and we'll put this one to multiply, and we'll lower the opacity to 50% maybe. And in terms of the layout, I'm actually going to select the top and bottom letters, and I'm just gonna invert those. So now we have a clean version, which will be available on Patreon. But for me personally, I'm gonna make a very much like a darker or grungier version. So what I'm gonna do is remove the inversion and delete all of the gradients. And I'm gonna bring in a grunge texture from my filth package, which has been my bread and butter in terms of designing this style for a while at this point. So we got like a nice little rust texture, and I think I'm gonna wanna put it in a way where it's the actual rust gradient isn't like prominent in the picture. And let's figure out just the background first. So I'm gonna just play around with some blend modes and experiment a little bit. So the exclusion is always a nice way to start, because there it's like you get some really wacky results. So what I would do, for example, now is press Control, Alt, Shift, and E on my keyboard, and that will make a separate layer of everything that's visible so far. Maybe what we can do is put a high pass filter on it. And the higher we put this, the weirder. You can get that kind of like that deep fried meme look, if you know what I mean. Then we'll add some noise, and then we will stylize it with an emboss filter. As you can see, we now have this like really wacky, weird grunge layer. So let's see what kind of like blend modes we can put over this. Okay, so if we put it to overlay, you can get that contrast and that sharpness that really adds here something here, I think. In terms of the way that I want to display this, I'm not really 100% certain yet. What I kind of want to do is like play around with the colors first. So let's just grab a gradient map at this point, delete the layer mask, and then just cycle through some pre-made gradient maps that I've made over the years. So I'm not really getting anywhere. What would be interesting now is I actually made an Adobe library where I found some very interesting flyers, and based on those flyers I did some color research. Basically I made color swatches out of all of these flyers. So what I want to do is maybe see if there's any like color palette that I like. This one speaks to me at this point, and see if there's a way to implement this into the design. That being said, I think, I just deleted the layouts again, sorry. So yeah, 21. So I'm gonna add in those colors. So what I'm gonna do actually now is make a gradient map where we delete the mask of it, and then in one color we have this gray, and then in the other one we have like the blue. So now if we make the gradient map again, this will be just like the gray and the teal color, or the violet color, I guess, which is, I kind of like this for the colors here. And then I was thinking maybe like the green elements more for the bottom here, but yeah, we kind of need to, can you go please see what that looks like, because it might be like really flat. Yeah, because now it kind of like gets very monotone or like duotone, I guess. But what I tend to do if it's like just getting too much of one color is play around with the blend modes for these a little bit. And then for this like the text overlay, maybe we can blend it in with the background a bit, maybe a bit harsher, less smooth. So that way you can get the grunge over here and like have that blend in. Not really too sure about the text at this point. I think black and white still looks better in this case. And especially on these, I think I'm gonna make these all caps. And maybe we're gonna just do the same font looking at it now, because it's, to me it feels a bit now that the font doesn't really work with the rest of the poster. And now in terms of the background, it's like the door tickets are in the way of the 3D renders. So what I maybe would do is just make these smaller. So that's the way. And this is of course way too clean still, like the text. So what I want to do is go to filter, distort, wave. So I'm going to make 25 generators. The wavelength will be between 2 and 8. The amplitude will be between 1 and 3, and then 3%. And that's still a little bit too much looking at it now. So maybe we'll lower the amount of waves and we'll put this to 2%, maybe this to 6, so the waves are a bit smaller. This is always a bit of tweaking. So with and without, it's really subtle. So I'm going to apply another wave to this, and then I'm going to make that one a bit bigger. And now to actually apply some damage to this is I'm going to do another filter, a displacement map, and I'm going to drag in one of the displacement maps from my Rave Essentials pack. As you can see, this also adds in that wobbly effect. And maybe we also need a bit of blurring, just 0.5 pixels or something should do. But I am not a fan of the coloring at this moment. So I'm going to just delete that for now and add in a hue saturation, make it black and white, and then add in a levels adjustment or a curves adjustment to increase the contrast a bit more. I feel like we're getting somewhere now. And just to make the text a bit more visible, what I want to do is just grab all of this stuff and group it and just remove the appearance, and then go to the appearance panel. Where is it? Oh, here. And I'm going to add in a fill and then a stroke, and the fill can be white and the stroke can be black, and we'll just make that rounded. And then we just move it underneath the fill, and maybe we'll make it a little bit thicker. And then I'm going to repeat that with another stroke that's white and 10 pixels. So it's going to be like invisible at this moment, but then I'm going to duplicate one more and make it 15 pixels and make that black again. And then we have this nice little double outline, I guess. And let's see what this looks like in the poster. That's a lot better visible. So one thing is that I think it's a bit like empty in here. So what I want to do is maybe also like texture the whole thing a bit more, and maybe we need to hide this like deep fried part a bit more, but let's see. I think we will just lower the opacity to 20%, so it's still there. And what I also wanted to experiment with is the or is it the tribal scribbles? And we'll just grab some separate shapes and see what they will do if we just use them as like a contrast piece. So kind of like this. So we invert it to white and then we just change the blend mode to difference, maybe underneath the text. It's not that prominent, I guess. But what we can do is we can try this with another copy of the infection. So we'll just delete the layer mask. We'll put that over here and we'll make this black and white and change the blend mode to difference. And since it's mostly like a full color thing, maybe we wanted to make less visible by just increasing the contrast a bit more. Yeah, and I'm kind of happy with how this looks like, but what I want to do is just make sure that everywhere where the actual layout is, I just want to hide it with a mask like this. And that being said, yeah, no, this works for me. The only thing now is just coloring this. One thing to note is I actually kind of want to make sure that in the text layer, I want to apply some depth, some color depth with one of the textures, but I'm just going to go and blur this a bit so it's not that like grainy. And of course we'll make it black and white. There we go. Maybe a little bit less Gaussian blur, maybe like 5 pixels. All right. So let's group all of this and name it background. And what I tend to do now is just like convert all of this into a smart object. So we have the base poster in a separate nested PSD file within our poster. And now I can apply some effects to the whole poster in general. So for example, if I want to have it glow a little bit, I can just apply a Gaussian blur and put the Gaussian blur to lighten or maybe to screen. Well, maybe lighten is the way to go so it's less drastic. So now it like glows a little bit. And let's just make a custom color gradient ramp for this. So we'll start with a nice black and we'll end up with a like a faded white. I think the way to go is just with a like nice blue tealish color. I will slowly shift the hue towards a very faded green. Well, it's actually just gray, I guess, but and the darker it gets, the more the hue changes from a blue towards a like earthy green or yellow. And it's most apparent in the glow effect, I guess. Also gonna make one more layer here and fill it with 50% gray and go to filter, noise, add noise, go to 10%, go back to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and we'll just filter it or blur this like half a pixel. So it's less sharp, I guess. And I will just put it to overlay, I guess. See if that helps with fading or graining up the glow a little bit, as you can see. And now it's a matter of texturing. So I'm just gonna go back to my Ray Flyer Essentials kit over here, and we'll just grab some paper textures. I think this one's nice. Let's go with 5, and we'll put this over the coloring and just change the texture to lighten. It's a bit difficult to see, I guess. We'll just put it to screen and we'll lower the opacity to maybe like 50%. And we also need like a grungy photocopy effect, maybe this one, 15, to make sure that the whites aren't perfectly white. So we'll cover the whole poster and click on multiply. And then I'm going to press Command or Control M on my keyboard to bring up the curves and make this multiply texture just a little bit lighter. And now we just have this nice little paper texture over it. I think I'm just going to make this a little bit less drastic and then just lower the opacity to maybe like 75%, maybe 50. There we go. All right, and there we go. The two versions of the poster, one clean, one a lot more grungy. My personal preference is the one on the right, this one right here. But let me know in the comments which one you like the most. And if you want to download the project files, the PSDs and the Illustrator files for this video, you can find them on my Patreon. The link is in the description down below, as well as links to all of the asset packs, textures, vector shapes, 3D renders, and everything else that I used in this video. If you want to see more tutorials, let me know in the comments down below, because doing so keeps me motivated to create more of these kinds of videos for you guys. With all of that being said, this is Tom from Dreadlabs tuning out. Thank you so much for watching, and I hopefully see you guys in the next video.